Everybody.
No, all right.
All right.
We'll wait till next time.
Yes. So do we want to introduce Dana before public comment?
Why don't you just do public comment
All right.
and then word announcements, and then we'll.
Public comment from anyone in the audience? No? Thank you. Committee announcements? Warden announcements?
So Todd and I came up with 7 conservation dates for everyone. It's either gonna be surveys or trash pickup, depending on the weather. But it's gonna be April 3rd, we'll meet here at 10 a.m. May 15th, we'll meet here at 9 a.m. 16th, 10 a.m. June 26th, 6 a.m. here. 27th, 7 a.m. July 10th, 6 here, and the 11th, 7 here.
We'll go back over that on the agenda item.
Thank you. All right. Next on the agenda is Mr. Dana Morse, clam experiment presentation. How's it going?
I'm good, thanks. Danny, you should be good. Just plug right into that. Okay. Should be. Hopefully this will work. Whoops, not that one. Fingers crossed. All right. What's that?
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you, David and Paul and members of the committee for having me here. My name is Dana Morse. I'm with the Sea Grant Program and University of Maine Cooperative Extension. I'm based at the Darling Marine Center. My work is in education, applied research, and technology transfer. Most of my work in the past 10, 15 years is in shellfish production, either commercial fishing or aquaculture, but my background is in fishing gear technology. And about a year ago, I came to this committee and said, hey, I've got an experiment that I'd like to do. I'd like to ask your advice. I'd like to tell you about it. And so these are the results of that experiment a little more than a year later. And I'll try to get through it. How much time do I have? This should take 10 or 15 minutes or so. Is that okay?
We got a meeting at 6, right?
Yeah. Just
Ah,
sorry?
Just fast forward, that's all.
yeah.
Okay. All right. So I will hurry up. So basically, I know I'm preaching to the choir here. Clam farming techniques have not worked reliably. There's been a little bit of a success here and then a lot of failure over there. So either for aquaculture or for stock enhancement or that kind of stuff, it's been a difficult slog. So this idea kind of came from hearing a story about 30 years ago from a guy who pulled up a PVC pipe down in Barnstable, Mass. It was a 2-inch PVC pipe, used to have a sign on it, and like 5 or 6 full-size soft-shell clams poured out of the pipe. So that told me that they could live, they could survive, they could grow in tight quarters, all that kind of stuff. And so sometime after that, the West Coast started growing gooey duck clams, the great big ones, in 6-inch PVC pipe. And so this is basically the same notion. Can you put a pipe into the mud, sink it down so that hopefully the worms can't get at it? Can you put some mesh over the top? And then can you put some seed clams in there at different densities and see them grow? So that's what this was about. And we did 3 sites. The Darling Marine Center on the Damascoto, that doesn't show up here. We tried Woodward Cove, AKA the bullpen over in the New Meadows, and we tried out along Mere Point. A guy that I know has a house, and he said, hey, come do this thing in front of our house. I have had on David's recommendation and other folks from this area thought that Basin Cove would be a great place to try this experiment too. Over a year ago, I applied for a special license from the Maine Department of Marine Resources. That has never come through yet, where I'm still kind of pressing that button so that I would have liked to have done this experiment over there, but right now we have the Darling Center on the Damascotta, the bullpen over on the New Meadows, and Longmere Point here. So this slide, which many of you will not be able to see, we went from basically about 380 or 390 days for this experiment. It ranged from 382 days in Woodward Point and Mere Point to 396 days on the Darling Center, and this started from basically May and August of 2022 through June and August of 2023. So what I did was basically use a bunch of PVC pipes. They were anywhere from 14 to 18 inches in length. Most of them were 4 inches in size. There were some 2-inch pipe and some 3-inch pipe. And we tried a few 5-gallon buckets in there as well with the bottom cut out. So none of these structures had any bottom to them. They were open on the bottom. We got seed donated from Down East Institute. I did not take the initial stocking size measurements. I should have done that ×0 measurement, because what I was relying on is that hatchery mark that happens with hatchery seed. That kind of worked out and kind of didn't, so I'll tell you about that later. Most of the results that I'm going to tell you about here are based on the 4-inch pipe. I'm going to leave the 5-gallon buckets and the 2 and 3-inch pipe off to the side for the moment. So for the 4-inch pipe, we did 5 clams, 10 clams, or 15 clams, and oddly enough, in the buckets, we just threw 125 in there, see how they'd do. So basically, to get the clams in, mostly what we did was we'd count out the clams, and then we'd have the pipe or the bucket, and we'd turn it upside down, so now the mesh is on the bottom and the open on the top. Just basically sprinkle those clams in there, slam it upside down, shove it into the mud so that maybe 2-3 inches were sticking above the mud. And mostly we were working around the 1-foot tide level. And we did that because we wanted a little bit of regular air drying, so the seaweed and stuff like that would get dried off a little bit. And we wanted it low enough so that if there was a lot of sea ice, it would just kind of sit on there, and then the ocean would lift it back up, as opposed to higher up in the intertidal, you might get ice crowding in there and just rototill everything. And here's what we found. Well, then we started taking them out last year, and here's a picture of me on the left and Brandon Harris, who's a graduate student at the UMaine. And you can see there's a bunch of clams in this sieve. This was from a pipe that we originally planted 5 clams in. So in Woodward Point and at Mere Point, we really caught a set. And that set persisted, it lived, and it grew. We caught a little bit of a set over at the Darling Center, but not so much. So basically what we did was we would take the core out of the pipe or the bucket, we'd run it through a sieve, about 4-millimeter mesh sieve, and then we'd count to see what we got. This is like proof of concept. It wasn't super strictly scientific all the way through, but we wanted to see if this thing might work. And so I don't know if we can turn this a little bit, but I've got a couple of videos that you might find interesting. So I'm going to try not to. So here's inside the Darling Center. And so we'd take this core of mud out about like this, and I wanted to see kind of where the clams were sticking in the pipe. And long story short, you might have 1.5 inches, or we got some 2-inch clams out of this. And they mostly hung out in the top 3 to 5 inches. And you'll see in this video and later on, the clams were all pretty much on the same level. And above that, all the mud was nice and soft and fluffy, because those clams are all, there you can see them starting to poke out. Mm-hmm. Those clams are aerating or hydrating all that mud. And then below that, inside the tube or the bucket, it's pretty hard packed. And you could really just like pull the top part off, and there were the clams, and then there was nothing below that. They just hadn't gotten big enough to dig down there. Let's see here. So here's another look at it. So here's the hard packed bottom part of the core. This is probably 18 inches in total. And in the upper part, it's that really soft mud. You could just scoop it out. You could, if you were picking clams, you could do it out of here. And so here's Maddie Bailey, who was working for the town of Brunswick at the time. She came out to help. And I think this was a 10 clam pipe. So we had planted 10 clams about this big. We got almost 30 clams out of it. And the seed that we brought out were also about this big. So they had settled, and then they had lived. And I'm going to stop this because time's a wasting here. I want to continue. But basically, we saw that over in the bullpen and in Mere Point, where we'd plant 5, 10, or 15. We got a lot of setback, as far as I could tell, beautiful looking seed. And the worms in almost all of these buckets and pipes, there were a couple of worms, but there weren't many. There were a couple of crabs, but not many. And if I was to estimate what the overall survival was, it was probably between 80 and 90% over the course of a year. And we found that to be true at the Darling Center, at Woodward Point, in the bullpen, and at Mere Point. So we had 3 sites that had really good survival. Let's see here. I'm not going to walk through all this, but this is pretty much all the data aggregated. I just wanted to make sure that you saw that I had it. I've got all the sites, different data pulled apart. But one thing that I will say, for example, we even had a 2-inch pipe where we stocked 7 clams in a 2-inch pipe, and I got back 6 a year later. So 6 clams about this big can sit in a pipe, a 2-inch pipe, and live and grow for a year. So that told me something about how densely clams can live, and you guys probably know this way better than I do about when they really have good conditions, how tightly they can live. The last couple of things that I'll say here, in terms of survival, you'll see that there's 116 and 109% survival, and you can't have that. That's because when we were taking the clams out and counting them, I was relying on identifying that hatchery mark to say this was a hatchery clam versus this was a seed. And that was my mistake. I thought I'd be able to see that hatchery mark on every clam. But some of those seed kind of had that mark around the same size too, so I probably counted them as ones we planted, and that gives us more than 100% survival. But at the very lowest, we had 82 in there. The density was also high. That's the middle graph. We had, at the lowest, we had an estimated 86% density and over 100. So just the take-home message there is that survival was high, even in the higher densities. And growth in terms of millimeters, I should put this in inches, was anywhere, and this is about a little over a year, was over an inch to an inch and 3/4 growth in 1 year. And so there were clams that we stocked in at probably 12 to 17 millimeters, about a half an inch, and in a year, they came out over 2 inches. And then there's a bunch of them that came out just shy of 2 inches, 1 3/4 inches or so, in those densities and over that period of times. And one of the things that I'm dying to try, I started to do it last year, was can you plant some little seed clams in the springtime, like this time of year, and can you get a marketable product by October, November, December time? And my guess, and again, you all have seen this for years now, I would guess, is that the answer is probably yes. If you get a good growing location, you can probably put a seed in the beginning of time of the year when the blooms are starting and get a marketable product out before Christmas. That's my guess. Here's the group of clams that came out from a 4-inch pipe. Yes means that it had netting on the top. We had some with no netting on the top to kind of do the Brian Beal thing. We got to try it so it's not protected. And then there were 15 clams stocked. And I forget what the number is, but it looks like about 30-odd clams there. And you can see how big, this is a regular Ziploc bag. You can see how some of these clams, how big they are. You can see the hatchery mark on some of these great big clams as well. So we kind of assumed that like this group right here was hatchery, and this group was seed. We got a few false angel wings, we got a few hard clams, we got a couple of razors about this big in there as well. So they were collecting seed. And again, we didn't see a ton of ribbon worms, even though I had been advised that the bullpen and Mere Point were areas where there were plenty of worms. And there were a few crabs. So here's some of the take-home messages. I'd like to know how long these tubes need to be. And the way that I think about this is, and I'm dying to hear what you guys have to say about this. A worm, are we doing okay on time? Or should I wrap it up?
We're getting close.
Okay. How a worm forages, how they look for food. And I have heard from diggers many times that you'll find worms way down there. I'm wondering, is that where they're traveling? Or are they down there because they've come down a hole and they've found a clam and they're eating and you just happened to get them? If they're just looking for food, if I was putting myself in the position of a worm, I'd travel where my encounter rate was likely high. I want to move where I'm likely to encounter a tube, whether it's a seed or a bigger clam. That's probably not 2 feet down. It's probably higher up where you'd probably get the seed and then some bigger ones and then the really big clams. Plus, it's easier to move. Down in the bottom, it's harder packed. The worms would move up in the softer sediment, I think. And they probably don't want to be above because crabs might get them or seagulls might pick them off. So what this means in terms of tubes is like, how long does a tube have to be? Can it be 6 inches and be effective? Can it be a foot? And if we're thinking about scaling this up to like a blue barrel or a fish box driven into the mud, maybe a foot is good. I don't know, but I would love to do more work on this. I have plans on doing this. And I would like to know what the industry would think would maybe be a scaled-up approach. What would that look like? What the next step should be? What would be of interest to you? And I think I'll stop there. And there are many people who helped on this, including David. Thank you. A lot of advice from diggers and guidance about what to do, what not to do, where to go, where not to go. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And are you looking for like some input from us, or like, because my concern, and I have to attest, like, we spent a number of years putting seed out using those sections of barrels, and we had great success until we lifted them, and it was a shame that we had to do that, but just it weren't practical and feasible because we figured eventually the worms were going to make their way into those barrels.
Yeah.
I think specifically when you have an obstruction like that holds water when the tide leaves it, you're creating an incubation effect, which promotes growth and makes them grow that much quicker. My question is, the plastics, is there chemical plastics within that shell stock, because they're living their life within that plastic. I know that, plastics has been a real big issue in the West Coast because there's so much of it used in culture, culture and shellfish. That's, that would be my biggest concern,
Yeah.
Other than that, it's too bad you couldn't scale that up. So,
I think we could definitely test it.
yeah,
We could try PVC versus a blue barrel, which is probably polyethylene.
yeah,
And put those through some chemical tests and find out what was in the clams. My first job here was to come back to you and report back to you because I'd come to you a year ago and I wanted to let you know what was going on. But I'm very interested to hear what you have to say. So if you've got questions or ideas. On the plastics end of things, one of the things that I am really excited about is that there are all kinds of companies that are testing compostable and biodegradable plastics right now.
yeah.
Some of them are kind of soft plastics. There's one company on the West Coast that is testing a hard plastic, like would go into a fish box. And here in Maine, we're starting to do some work about how you can, if you've got an idea for a new structure, for example, a cage or a box, well, we can get a hold of that resin, and then we can 3D print it, and we can trial it. Instead of having to invest in a big, expensive plastic mold, and then if you had ideas about, well, the box ought to look like this, or the tube or the thing ought to look like that, let's find someone to print that thing out with the new plastics and then try it. So I do see some ways forward there, and maybe this is right at that overlapping between culture technique, how do we grow a thing, and the materials that are involved so that we don't screw up the environment, we don't pollute the product that we're trying to grow,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Again, thank you, Dana. That was pretty interesting to see the success you had there.
You're welcome. I'm excited.
Any reason why it wouldn't work with quahog or mussels?
I'm sorry?
Any reason why it wouldn't work with quahog?
Not that I know of. It might work. I'll ask you a question back, though. Are hard clams as much affected by ribbon worms as soft shells are? They are.
Well, up to a certain size, right, guys?
Actually, I've only witnessed a ribbon worm and a quahog 4 different times, and I just think that no, by far it's a meager amount. Like they do prey on quahogs. We find ribbon worms in quahog beds where there's no clams around, and I think it's very minimal.
How about
So-
the green crabs and the smaller quahogs? Like half an inch?
The green crabs, they do, prey on the smaller quahogs. I think once they reach like 8 to 10 millimeter at the hinge, though, again, that's,
Okay.
minimal, really, yeah.
Yeah. It may be that if you could get your seed stock that big, you could do the netting thing, but not have any sides that go down into the mud,
Yeah.
maybe?
I mean, we have, in Brickyard Cove in Quahog Bay, there's a V6 engine sitting there, correct, or a straight 6 engine, 6-cylinder, sitting out of the mud like this far, and all of us have picked quahogs out of every cylinder of that block engine's been sitting there since I've been digging. So, I think any confined, as shellfish are going to take advantage of, for sure. So,
And I'll keep you posted about the Basin Cove, but if any of you would like to do some more of this work, I'd love to support that if possible. And I realize that there's always going to be some friction between aquaculture and fishing, but I see that depending on what your goals are,
Yeah.
you could use this technique for a lot of different ways. My job is not to draw judgments between one or the other,
Oh, yeah.
but to figure out a technique that can work.
no, definitely. I mean, as far as aquaculture and wild, we need one another.
Right
Just
on.
needs to be done right. That's all.
Yep.
So, thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Awesome. Next on the agenda, Quahog Bay Conservation Disclosure Discussion. There's really not a whole lot to discuss, correct? We've got the form in front of us.
Yeah, I put the proposed form in front of you.
From August 1st to December 1st, right?
Was there any argument on that for, like, one of them was during spawning season? When do they?
They spawn throughout the summer months.
That's not really, and then December to December, it wasn't like freezing and spawning the 2 major concerns that we were trying to
Nope.
deal with?
The health of the mud, and if we had, sub-marketable stock that we wanted left alone until it reached marketable size. So that was our biggest concerns with the closure of this bay. Yep. So,
I have a question. Are you saying, what is the start date, May 1st?
August.
August.
1st?
Yep.
So are you gonna in October say, oh, we gotta open this up because or like you did last year, or are you gonna really close it so people know when it opens and when it closes? Or
No.
is this-
Right.
Is this just like a random, later on, you're gonna randomly open it up because, the rest of the town is devastated, we gotta have these, or are you making a physical end date that this is when it is, December 1st? Like last year, it was supposed to be at a certain time, and you just said, okay, Thursday,
Yeah, I
you
never
said, we're gonna
voted.
open it up on Monday. And
We had multiple discussions over that emergency opening. I'm sorry that you're not
When you make
in,
those meetings,
yeah,
I'm
all right,
sorry,
well,
but what I'm saying is that when you do that, it's not fair to the people that don't come to every meeting. It's great for you guys, because you come to every meeting. But for some of us, you know, we don't come to every meeting. We have to come to two, so we do. And if we're not there when you're discussing it, and when you're discussing it, you're just discussing it. You're not saying, okay, we're gonna open it on September 15th, on June. When you're talking about in June, you're not saying we're gonna open it on September 15th. You're saying, we should open it sometime soon.
yeah.
And that's different than saying, we're gonna go from August to December, and then having it be December, than just saying August, and then, you know, we gotta open it because the rest of the town is dead, and, you know, we killed the rest of the town, so we gotta open it now. That's.
We weren't killing, we were taking what I considered, shell stock that, was future, gonna be our future settlement. We were chasing them right up into the hard pan in a lot of places, and we only opened it, 4 weeks early?
Yeah, well, last year too, it was supposed to be closed for 5 months, and then it was like, after 4 months, it was nice and flat, everything was good, and it was pretty good when it opened.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Just co-ops or plans too? Or-
everything, but
Yeah.
we're doing it in August instead, and open it up December 1st also is, Brunswick closes December 1st for Cohoggan.
Yep,
When it opened in September, it was like, poof, the market went to nothing and put on 1,000 limit and everything. So it's like, if you close it August to December 1st, you still get that 4 months for it to heal, and you can still go dig clams and stuff during the
Yeah.
4th of July when the price is good in the bay. There's a few places that there's clams.
and most importantly, to ensure a good seed settlement, because the hogs are mostly active, July, like the end of July through August, and even right into September, so, yeah,
David,
yes.
I'm just wondering though, it would seem to me that we know why we're doing it and everybody understands that. But if we do change the date that we plan to open it, could we post that on the website ahead of
They
time?
do,
Yep.
Yeah, we did.
they do.
We did, didn't we, last
Yep.
year? Yeah. Yeah. It's unfortunate that there are harvesters that just choose the lack of involvement. I mean, that's not our fault.
Maybe an email or something sent out for those people that don't use
Yeah.
Facebook and other possible social
Yeah.
media.
I just think last year it was, 5 months was a long time to be
Yeah.
without it. And just starting at 4 is like, I mean, after 4 months last year, it was nice and flat, and you still get all summer, or most of summer, June, July to
Yep,
still dig the bay, and
yeah.
I don't know.
So, I.
You guys do
Yep.
a committee vote?
Yes,
and,
sir.
Next step would be to go to the
For the-
selectmen.
From August 1st to December 1st. Robbie, second it?
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you, Mark. All right, thank you, guys.
We need to take a vote,
Just did.
did we?
Yep, sorry, Mary.
We're lightning fast.
We're lightning fast, fine. I assume it was, everybody voting.
Everybody did.
All right.
You abstained.
Right. I didn't see it.
That's right.
All right, next on the agenda is ordinance amendments.
So we're still talking to the town attorney to figure out if we can do the kind of like à la carte, your conservation. So right now it's all or nothing. You have to do all three, or you have to pay it out completely.
Yeah,
And is it 3 and 2 or 3 and 3?
Three and
So
two.
I brought up last meeting that to try and make it back mandatory, but talking with a bunch of people that didn't want it mandatory, I also thought that maybe a middle ground to help some people, if like they can, make it to maybe 1 or 2, but
Yeah.
they won't because it's all or nothing. So like if we can make it so that hypothetically your license says, well, it's gonna cost you $900 for a license, but you get a $200 credit for each 3 conservation day. That way, like if you show up to one, well, you got $200 off. You had nothing going on that day, you show up to a conservation, you get a couple $100 off. Or if you show up to 2, you get $400 off, and so on. That way, it's like kinda,
Yeah,
it,
well, you're gonna,
it might help to bring more people in if they can say, well, I'll go do 1,
yeah,
or I'll go do 2. But if it's all or nothing, they think, well,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna go do 1 or 2 if I'm not gonna get anything out of it
yeah.
at the end.
Yeah.
You know,
And
so
it's gonna give a lot of harvesters the option, do I wanna go make my $100 today, or do I wanna take 200 off of my license?
Right,
So,
yeah.
yeah. Big
we're
difference.
just
I
kind
think
of
I
a
think we
little
should definitely
middle
move forward.
ground there.
Yep.
Try and make it so we can,
The town attorney, she's just doing her due diligence to make sure that it's,
Yeah.
you know, all good, but.
Well, I think that point thing would work a lot better. So many points for the season. Because if you're doing the conservation or you're doing the meetings,
yeah.
you're still gonna make them frickin' points up either way.
Yeah,
Yeah, so you have to come up, and that, I mean, I think that can be addressed too with the attorney, right? Or is it only because of?
I need some
labor?
guidance. We're kind of bouncing all over the place here, and our time is getting short.
Yeah.
yeah.
So we kind of need to,
And it's the point system, I think would go a lot smoother. Everybody would be able to do it. People would show up to the meetings more because they'd have the incentive to do that by getting them points.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You know, that's just the way I see it.
Really just been the same thing, flip-flopped around,
Right.
you're not playing with your money.
Right, right.
It's the way they do it in Brunswick and Freeport. They have a point system, so it's gotta be legal. I mean, they've been doing it for years.
Right.
And so if you guys want to switch to that makes more sense than just totally doing away with being able to pay. It gives a second option if you don't want to, you'd rather come to the meetings or you'd rather do conservation. Maybe you could do 6 conservations and not come to the meetings at all to get your points. It's the way it's been done in other towns.
Well, historically, we always had one, you had 1 meeting required, and we went to 2. That was to get more involvement out of the harvesters and make the harvesters realize, like, if you feel that you're out of the loop, you need to attend some of the meetings. I don't think there should be a point system for coming to these meetings, but that's my opinion. I think that it should be mandatory
Well, that's the way to
regardless,
go,
so.
because Whatever your opinion is the way it all goes. So just say you don't wanna do the points and lead him in that direction, because that's the way things seem to work here. is
but on the other side of the coin is if you do points, then it'd have to be done. It would be back to a mandatory type thing. So like, if it was,
Right.
hey, you have to come to 8 out of 12 meetings, then you'd have to come to 8 out of 12 meetings. You wouldn't be able to buy,
4 and 4, and they also let them buy so many points. You can buy a very small amount of points you can buy, and then you have meetings in case there's something comes up, like you break your leg and you can't get out of the house, at least you can buy two months worth of meetings or whatever.
yeah,
It makes more sense if you're trying to make everybody happy to go to
Mhm.
points than it does to just say, okay, this is what we're gonna do. You're gonna come to 3 conservations, or you're not getting your license, and you're gonna come to 2 meetings, or you're not gonna get your license. That's really very rigid and not, I don't play well with others. You guys probably noticed that. And that's why I do what I do, because I don't play well with others. And I go and do my thing, and I do what I wanna do, and I pay my bills and make my living at this. And I've been where you guys are. I've been on the committee twice. I've served 6 years. I've done all the stuff you guys are doing. But I don't like to be forced to do anything. That's why I don't participate.
Walter, things have changed so much since you've been on this committee, so much. So don't sit there and say you've been where we have and you've done what we've done,
I know you have.
because you haven't.
I have.
No,
Trust me, I have, Dave.
no, you haven't. I'm sorry you haven't.
Your
So,
opinion is that, my opinion is that I have. your
we'll just,
opinion is
we'll
that
just
you
leave it
haven't.
at that we have made leaps and bounds with this committee, and we've accomplished a lot. Truly have.
let's circle back, 'cause we're
So-
still running out of time.
Yeah,
here.
we're
We
running
just
out of time,
Need some
so-
I know
guidance.
down in Cushing, I think they let them buy 2 points for $50, I think, a point, is the way they do it, down by.
I mean, I know I brought up the points thing
They have 10 points.
last
yeah,
fall.
yeah, they let them buy 2.
sometime. That was one thing that I brought up.
So we're kind of on a path right now that we should either just continue with the way it's going or scrap it until next year,
Yeah.
because the administration and the attorney are gonna get pretty upset that we keep bouncing all over the
Well,
place here.
we'll further the discussion, I mean, but my biggest fear, if we go with the point system, we're gonna get our meetings saturated with harvesters. We're not gonna have no helping hands to fulfill our conservation,
No,
our
no,
physical conservation. And I'm sorry, but my livelihood is worth committing to 3 conservations throughout the year. And I feel sorry for those that feel that they shouldn't have to. Again, that's just
Well, I
my,
don't feel that we shouldn't have to. I think that some of it's bullshit. We go and we seed these areas, we take the seed out of another area, we kill that friggin' area off, and we put the seed in another area, and that friggin' shit does.
when,
That don't make no sense to me
Yeah,
either.
Kimberly Island, living proof of that, full pledge.
that was with soft shell. I mean, all of our conservation has evolved around hard shell. I mean, you guys are talking about something that was done over a decade ago, so.
Oh, we've done this with the little cohogs. I never got to dig any of them friggin' things that we planted. Well, who got to get all of them if there was any that friggin' grew up?
Where we've got scheduled surveys to go find
I
out.
wanna see proof, because proof is in the pudding, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're gonna get an area, and we do the conservation, we dig it up, we get all the seed out of it. Who's to say where them going, and is people making money out of them spots?
You guys have to understand, though, if you want to seed an area to a density that's going to make it worth going in there and actually harvesting them, you're talking about, casting them very dense. I mean, all the areas that we've casted product and introduced product into wasn't intended on actually be able to go back there and bend over and dig that product. It was intended for them to grow up and spawn and just
Right.
add to the
It didn't really work.
add to the circulation of spawn in the water column.
It did work in Oakhurst, I was down there, we seeded Oakhurst one
Yeah,
year.
yeah.
and then-
We've thrown a pile of seed in High Head, and like you said, we're gonna go check these areas, so, but you guys have to understand that, there's no denying it don't work with soft shells, but, to make a mockery of our program when you haven't even done it for how many years, I don't know, you gotta step back and be a little.
I've dug some of the hogs we planted at the reach, and I know that they were planted hogs, because when you got in those patches, they were like breaking a line.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
sounds like a natural
yeah,
setting to tell.
yeah, oh, yeah,
Well, back to topic, I think that we should talk about a point system next year
yeah,
and stick with what we got for now.
yeah.
Yeah,
All right,
so stay with what we have
So
for this
it's three
year.
conservations and.
But
Yes.
definitely in the future, we'll discuss points.
Yep.
But not now, because we don't have time.
We can keep it on the agenda every month going forward until we
Yeah.
hash out something
Okay.
we actually
Yeah.
really want to do.
For the folks that don't know as much, comments around Freeport and Brunswick. Next time, if we're gonna have it on the agenda,
Yep.
we actually have,
Their
some
language?
information on
Yep.
competitive or other towns?
Yep, we can bring that.
Okay. We can figure out what they are.
All right, next on the agenda, Camden, Reese, where'd he go?
Real
Okay.
quick,
Yeah.
so the warden, I'll get the warden's dates. I'll make sure those get out to everybody.
Yep.
Do you guys want to talk about any committee dates right now, and then Camden can finish up the meeting?
Yeah,
Yeah, so I wrote down, 4, trying to get 4 on weekends that might help out a little bit. I was thinking about the 21st at 3 PM,
What date, what month?
the 21st of April. The 20, at 3 PM here, the 27th of April here at 7 AM, the 28th here at 7 AM, and the 11th of May at 7 AM.
Are these meetings or conservation?
There'd be conservations, either trash pickups or going and checking, or doing, or I think you guys got, 7 days for surveys,
that was the 11th of May?
11th of May at 7 AM.
I didn't write them.
Right.
Yep.
So those are the 4 that I kind of thought up, and that would give us 11.
These are the ones that the wardens have scheduled for surveys as well.
which 11 should be
Later.
plenty of
Yeah, I'll ask you to email them.
dates, I think.
All right.
And they were all town office, right?
Yes.
You, Robert, keep me in touch, all right?
I don't care when. I can conservation.
Yep.
Post them.
I just figured some
Yeah,
weekend days
we'll
might
post, we'll
help
post
some.
everything.
We'll give,
My wife just wants me to bring up, she's not here, she wanted to ask if you could give receipts like this year for people.
Yeah, I think I brought that up
Yeah.
and asked about receipts, and that's what I was,
So people
Yeah.
can prove that they.
We were
They
trying, we were
usually
trying to
give
do
you
the
Yeah.
digital email thing, but
Yeah.
yeah.
All right,
People prefer receipts, we can do that.
yep, all right, thank you, guys. Are we ready to welcome Camden
If
Reed?
you're good with this, so this is it for now through the end of July. These are the dates that are gonna be, all right,
yep, that's it, nothing added.
perfect.
Camden, evening.
Hi, everyone. Camden Rez here. I am a clam digger in Brunswick. I'm also the chair. Oh, thank you. I'm also. Thank you. I'm a clammer in Brunswick. I'm also the chair of the Marine Resource Committee in Brunswick. And I work for Protect Maine Fishing Heritage Foundation. We're a nonprofit that fights against industrial scale aquaculture. I'm here today, and I'm sure you guys have already heard about, the work that we do. But basically, we're trying to assist towns and encourage them to develop and adopt some sort of program that gives you guys the say when it comes to aquaculture leases coming to town. Right now, if an aquaculture applicant applies for a lease in the subtidal water, it's technically state jurisdiction. We don't really believe that is completely true. There's home rule, which is a legal loophole or gray area, which gives towns the ability or authority to have say over the subtidal waters when it comes to aquaculture leases. And so we're trying to support the towns in their decision, whatever they want for aquaculture, we stick by. We're not trying to tell anyone what to do, but we want towns to be aware of the fact that they should have the right to have some sort of say when it comes to any aquaculture projects coming to town. And we think this is the most effective and best way for aquaculture to go forward in the future for many reasons. The DMR does not have the staff or the resource to actually implement or regulate the rules and regulations they put in place when it comes to each individual area. So it really helps to have the local people involved, and that's kind of what we're trying to do. But again, we're totally against industrial scale aquaculture. We support small scale aquaculture. But yeah, other than that, does anyone have any questions or anything that needs to be clarified?
Well, I believe I sent the committee members a copy of the model ordinance that you guys have devised, correct?
It's in your packet, yep.
Yep. And, I know that we've hashed it over and we've got something that we were gonna set forth for the selectmen, but I don't know if we should rethink that or take it back and not have it pertain to all aquaculture, just certain types of aquaculture and where the proposed lease is orientated, where it's located within each proposed site. I think there's more to it than just denying any application coming in front of us, because it could complement the ecosystem and it could, decimate the ecosystem. So, the selectmen meeting tomorrow night, correct?
Yeah, hopefully someone from this committee can, if you decide to move forward,
Yeah.
present that memo to them.
Well, I mean, I'll go and present the memo, but again, I feel strongly that, we should not implement that on every application coming in front of us. Nor does DMR have the ability to decipher what's gonna work as far as location in every body of water. So I honestly, I think with the way it's written right now, the selectmen are probably gonna say, no way. let's be realistic about it. I don't know. I don't know if we should hold off or.
Camden, have you had any dealings with any of the towns that have put one of these moratoriums into place where the state has kind of left them out of the loop instead? Because, where, the DMR makes the final decision and the commissioner makes the final decision on a lease, has there been any times where municipalities have kind of been left out of certain parts of an application process or surveying process when having this type of moratorium in place, that the state is just kind of thinking, well, they just don't want nothing, so we're just not gonna involve them as deeply as we may, or we just might take whatever they say with a grain of salt type of situation?
No, I haven't heard of anything like that happening. I'm not saying it's not possible. Have you, specifically, have you heard anything?
No, I haven't. I was just
okay,
wondering.
no.
I
Yeah.
was just wondering if you have, where you've been working with some of the towns to develop this, certain ordinances around aquaculture, if there's been any kickback from the state for them kind of saying, well, they're just putting a blanket on everything, so we're just gonna call it good, or.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen any sort of kickback from the state. Honestly, the only thing I've seen is, I think they've started to pay attention. They've had two separate times where they've done listening sessions on aquaculture. One was maybe 4 or 5 months ago, and then the last round of listening sessions was actually a month ago, and then they're happening now. So I think they're actually putting more effort into listening, because they recognize that the townspeople and, the people that work on the water actually should have a say, and they're actually more qualified to have a say, and actually will point out things that are more beneficial or negative for a certain area in regards to an aquaculture lease. So I haven't seen any sort of negative pushback from the state, but it is true that when I approach towns, and we've approached towns before about this, they're always extremely worried about, the pushback from the state. But I haven't seen anything from the state, and I don't believe that they would want to go down that path.
Oh,
And
I'm sorry.
yeah, sorry, I'll just finish up real quick. And then actually, the home rule law has been upheld recently with another case, not related to aquaculture, but in Bar Harbor, they upheld the home rule law in some sort of thing with, I can't go into this specifics, but if you look it up, home rule is something that legally can be upheld and has been upheld and recently has been upheld. So I think it's something that is really worth going down. And again, we're not trying to tell any town what to do. We just want to make sure that the town actually has a plan in place for aquaculture going into the future, especially as aquaculture is ramping up in every aspect of Maine's coast. So and aquaculture can be very good. It can be very bad. We just want to make sure it's done right, and we want to make sure that the people most affected by aquaculture actually have an input and a say when it comes to the leasing process. So
That was exactly my question, which is, has home rule been challenged?
Yep.
In court or in this setting, and has it been upheld or rejected? So.
Yeah, and I can actually.
That's the only case, the recent one in Bar Harbor?
No, I'm sure there's been several, but I'm just bringing that one up just because it happened only a month or two ago, and I can actually send that article to you guys as
That
well.
would be great,
So,
yeah.
Yep.
I think that, just back to your comment about if you're going in with too much ammunition and the board's likely
Yeah.
to push it back, maybe stepping back and just presenting that this is in flux, and we intend to
Yeah.
come back
And it's a
to you. But
concern.
this is giving you fair warning that home rule is something that that Harpswell should be asserting, right? And when the time is right, we'll have a plan that we want you to assert, right?
Yeah, and I'm pretty certain, like, DMR has protocol, and the leasing process, they have steps. And regardless whether a town has a moratorium on aquaculture or not, they're still required by law to send out ample notification to everyone that's invested, regardless whether the town has a moratorium on it or not. So,
Yeah, they are.
Also, last month, just to review for those that weren't here, I think we were talking about the moratorium on top floating aquaculture.
yes.
And we also discussed trying to get a study started to get a baseline of where we are now.
Yes.
And I'm going to follow through with Paul. We haven't had a chance since the last meeting
Yep.
to see what we can do to get a study designed by maybe FA Environmental, get the costs, and then we would be able to apply for the grant that is coming out in July.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, Marianne. Yeah, so
Cool.
I've shared, you know, what you guys have drawn up with the committee, and I don't know, I mean, we'll, I guess, hash things over next month, but I don't know, how do you guys feel about just like holding off on this proposal with the selectmen, but at least sharing our concerns tomorrow night with them and letting them know what's in front of us?
Maybe sharing it as an example,
Yeah.
but not formally proposing it.
Yeah.
And saying it needs refinement.
Yes.
But this is where the direction we're heading.
Yep.
Yeah.
'Cause I'm wondering if like we stuck with like, you know, got more specific and say, you know, nothing over 5 acres.
Yeah.
You know, because that's what you guys are saying is industrialized is over 5 acres, right?
Well, they
You're
had-
kind of thinking of.
Yeah.
So if it's
Well,
like,
the-
if,
In each individual plot, you can have many 5-acre plots, just not connected to each other in different
Yeah.
areas.
Or
So
they can
Yeah.
run it through us, any lease, and we can
Yeah.
hash it out.
Yeah.
Whether we think,
but if we could get more specific on, you know, instead of blanketing it, no top culture, nothing, like if somebody comes and wants a couple acres, but
Yeah.
it's out somewhere that ain't gonna hurt nothing.
Yeah.
true,
It's just, you know, what it's gonna, yeah, how it's gonna reflect, you know, the grow area, and every, you know, every proposal's different, so, but yeah, I'll definitely attend the selectmen's meeting tomorrow night and share our concerns, but,
I will say too, if you guys actually want something to happen around regulations for aquaculture in the town of Harpswell and having your own control, I would recommend it's not a good idea to go in with a proposal right away, especially if you want to oppose everything right off the bat. You want to work with these people. And this is just like my opinion. If you actually want something done, it's not a good idea to jump in there hot and say, this is what we want. We don't want any of it. It's really good idea to get as many people involved, talk with people, and come up with kind of a mix and trying to represent those people and see what you guys can do. But, you know, it's totally up to you, too, when it comes to the ordinance. You can even say any lease has to go through the Marine Resource Committee before, you know, you can give yourself more power through the ordinance like that, too. But, and again, the process is the select board votes on the moratorium, which puts all aquaculture leases at hold for 180 days, while the town comes together and builds their own ordinance to say what you want or what you don't want for aquaculture in the town of Harpswell. And we do have an ordinance that's already drafted and also has legal backing. So if you adopt our ordinance, which just goes over pretty much less than 5 acres, yada, yada, then it is legally backed, and, you know, that can be backed in court. But if you change any single word of that ordinance that we drafted, we can't legally back you in court. So if you want to draft your own, you know, you can tailor that, but just be aware of that, so.
All right.
Good to know.
yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your time, guys.
Yeah, yeah. Public comment, anyone? No? I guess, meeting adjourned then. Thank you, guys.